My name is Robert Tavy. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in private practice here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I've been asked today to talk about how you and your family can better manage the anxiety and stress that is naturally coming for a lot of folks because of being quarantined and because of the pandemic. Before I get started, a quick introduction to me. I've been in practice for 45 years, most of it in community mental health. I'm the author of 11 books, over 300 articles. I write an online column for Psychology Today entitled Fixing Families. I also write the Dear Bob column for Bloom magazine on parenting. And I also do workshops nationally on various mental health issues. One of the things we're going to talk about today is anxiety. And we're going to talk about how your brain and psychologically what happens when you become anxious. We're going to be talking about what you can do for yourself, for your partners, and for your kids in terms of managing your stress during this time and what not to do, the do's and don'ts that may help you. As I always say to folks, you're probably going to be hearing some things that you already know. There's a lot of media information out there about how to cope with the stress of all this. And so some things may be old news to you. And as I said, folks, whatever sticks, hold on to it, and what you don't like, throw it away. I've been talking to lots of folks in the last several weeks through telemedicine. And for some of them, what they're saying is that this hasn't been so bad. They're locked up in their house, but they're getting to spend more time with their kids. They can't go out and do things, but they are spending more time as a family, or they're spending more time with their partners. Or some folks are even saying, my life has slowed down enough where I feel less stressed. I'm getting more sleep. There's less demands on me. My day isn't quite so hectic. I'm not rushing home from work at 6 o'clock at night trying to make dinner. I have time during the day to do this. For other folks, though, it's been more difficult. And generally, they kind of fall into two camps. For some folks, their anxiety is very specific. They're unemployed. They were working in the restaurant industry, and now they don't have a job. Or they're worried that they're going to get furloughed or laid off. Or they're worried about the stock market, and their retirement savings are going down. Or they're just worried about the state of the world. They're worried about, they see the situations on the news of people who are struggling. They're worried about how long this is going to last. And so their worries are specific and palatable for them. And then there's another group of folks where it's less defined. They can't put a name to it. They can't quite label it, but they're aware that they're not sleeping so well. They're aware that they have this kind of general buzz of anxiety that they're feeling throughout the day. They have a sense of being irritable, more short-tempered, or they lack motivation. They're spending time watching YouTube videos rather than being productive in their jobs, or they don't feel creative when they used to be creative. For some folks, the first 2 weeks were fine. They go, oh, this is great. I can do my laundry on a Tuesday instead of having to do it on a Saturday. And now 2 or 3 weeks into it, it's starting to get old. And for a lot of folks, what they're saying is, I don't know how long this is going to last. And that's what's making it difficult. Or I feel lonely. Because even though I'm talking to folks on Zoom and trying to connect with friends, it's not the same. Or it's been hard because I haven't had any physical contact with anybody for weeks now. And I'm a touchy-feely kind of person, and that's one of my love languages. And so it's been hard. A lot of introverts have been thriving in this kind of environment, and for a lot of extroverts, it's been a real struggle. Now, a couple of weeks into it, or they're starting to feel antsy, and they're missing their friends. And again, the Zoom conferences aren't quite as good as what they could do live and in person. So these are difficult times. So let's talk about what happens when you get anxious. And part of it is that anxiety is always about the future. We can talk about depression. Depression's oftentimes about the past. I have regrets. I feel guilt. I look back on something that's happened and I replay it in my mind and I feel bad about it. Depression is also about feeling trapped, which is also part of what some people are feeling here. Anxiety is always about the future. What if? And again, what's difficult about the pandemic is we don't know the what ifs and we can't control them and we don't know how long it's going to last. And so that causes this sense of I don't know what's going to happen and I feel anxious about it. What happens with anxiety is your head starts to go down rabbit holes. You do these what if kind of scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I get sick? What if my kid gets sick? What about my parents 6 states away who are 75 years old? And you start to worry about worst case situations. What happens when you get anxious is your amygdala, which is on the side of your brain, fires up. It's where your emotions come from. And the first thing they do is they send chemicals to your prefrontal lobes, which is your rational brain. It goes offline. So your rational brain literally goes offline. And now you start to go down the rabbit holes of what if and what may happen next. What I say to folks is there's two different types of anxiety. There's rational anxiety and there's irrational anxiety. Rational anxiety is you're anxious about a real problem. So if you're starting to feel ill, if your kid is starting to cough, if your boss is talking about possible layoffs or furloughs, that's real rational anxiety. There's a problem that you need to address, something to pay attention to. There's maybe something to fix. Irrational anxiety, on the other hand, is about irrational things. You're worried about a meteor is going to hit your house. You're worried that the person who was 15 feet away from you in the grocery store who coughed is going to give you the virus. And your head starts worrying about things like this. And part of controlling anxiety is kind of sorting out rational versus irrational. If it's rational, you haven't heard back from your boss about the schedule. You haven't heard back from your partner about what's going to happen with his job. You want to take action. And the key word here is being decisive and taking action. You're writing it, you call up or you send an email to your boss, you talk to your partner about the job. Don't dither, don't try to do it right. The idea is to get things off your plate. The idea is to take action on what might be a real problem, just to get it out of your head. For a lot of folks, I've been saying to them, okay, let's jump ahead and do the worst case scenario. Let's think of the worst case scenario in terms of your job. Are you going to get furloughed? Are you going to get laid off? Can you come up with a plan now to manage this? And the idea of coming up with a plan now is not to kind of have self-fulfilling prophecies about what's going to happen with your job, but just to get it out of your head. Just to have a plan in place so you can tuck it away, push it to the side, rather than having this constant worry of what if, spinning in your head. So you want to be able to do that as quickly as possible just to kind of clear things out. The other thing that anxiety tends to do is it tends to make everything important. It's hard to sort out priorities. And this is where people get flooded and they get overloaded. So what I'm going to make for dinner is just as important as what do I need to do about saving money, which is just as important about what I'm going to wear tomorrow, which is just as important as ultimately what am I going to do if I'm not working in 2 months. You start to feel that. Everything starts to feel like it has equal weight, and now you get flooded because you want to do it right, because you want to solve all these problems, and you don't know where to start. And so part of getting the rational brain back online is being able to sit down with yourself, calm yourself down, and go, okay, what's the priorities? What kind of things do I need to pay attention to? What kind of things can I let go? The other thing that happens with anxiety is that if it gets too high, when you start to get flooded with too much of it, it's hard to rein it in. So for a lot of folks, they need to practice catching it early. A lot of the clients I have, if they're prone to anxiety, I tell them, you check on yourself every hour and ask yourself how you're doing on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being flatlined and 10 being crazy. You get to 4 or 5, the next question you want to ask yourself is, okay, what's going on? Is there a problem again I need to fix? Something I need to take action on? But you want to catch it early. You want to have plans. You want to take action, because if it gets to a 7 or 8, you're going to feel overwhelmed and it's hard to rein in. The other thing that happens with anxiety is that if you listen to your anxiety, you actually begin to feel better, and that's part of the problems with anxiety. So you've met people, you probably know people who have social anxiety. So they're planning to go to a party, they're going to talk to somebody about some social event, and they're worried about how it's going to go. They have performance anxiety, and their anxious brain tells them, just don't go. Tell them you're sick, stay home. Do you feel better if you do this? Absolutely, because now you've got to remove yourself from the anxious situation. The problem with this is it keeps those circuits running in your brain. And what anxiety tends to do is make your world smaller and smaller. If you listen to your anxiety, begin to pull back. And if you pull back from the party and you find out that works, the tendency is I'm going to keep doing that. And in 6 months, I'm not going to be going outside my house. So the antidote to a lot of anxiety is you need to be able to sort out, again, what's rational and what's irrational, but you want to be able to push against it. You want to control your brain rather than your brain controlling you. So it may be by taking decisive action. It may be by trying to solve a problem, even if it's not the most perfect solution. It may be I need to talk myself off the ledge. I'm getting anxious. I'm getting flooded. I'm getting overloaded. My depression may be kicking up. I need to have tools in my toolbox to knock it down. I need to go listen to music. I need to get mindful and go cook and pay attention to what I'm doing rather than letting my head run. I need to meditate. I need to take medication. I need to take a nap to reboot. The more tools you have, the better you feel like you're in control. The other thing that happens with anxiety, and not for everyone, but for a lot of folks who struggle with anxiety and or depression, is your brain tells you, I need to feel better in order to act. Only when my anxiety is down, only when I feel better for my depression can I do things. And generally, it's the opposite. You want to do things in order to feel better. What happens for a lot of folks who are prone to anxiety or depression is they tend to be emotionally driven. If I feel like it, I do it. If I don't feel like I don't do it. And again, in terms of solving problems or in these times where you're forced to be in one location but still need to get things done, you want to be able to kind of push back against that. You want to act in spite of how you feel. This is important for you as if you're working from home. This is important to kind of keep up with everyday tasks. This is important for your kids to learn as well. You don't want to be emotionally driven, where my emotions dictate what I do. Instead, again, the antidote is I need to do in order to feel better. If you keep doing the same things, you tend to feel the same way. So you want to begin to change that. And then finally, people who tend to be prone to anxiety or depression oftentimes are self-critical. Sometimes they're perfectionistic. They tend to hold on to their emotions. They tend to avoid conflict. They tend to have a hard time with strong emotions of other people. They oftentimes tend to be pleasers. I'm happy if you're happy kind of folks. And again, there's no miracle cures for this, but these are things that if you know this is part of your personality, this may be a good time to work on this. This is a good time to try to tamper down that self-critical voice and cut yourself some slack, or realize that everything doesn't have to be perfect and I can let some things go. And this is where if I tend to bite my tongue and walk on eggshells or hold stuff in, this is a good time for me to practice letting things out. I don't need to blow up. I don't need to rant, but I need to maybe write a note to my partner about how I'm feeling, or send an email to my mother because I felt upset by what she said when I talked to her last week. It's not about the mother. It's not about the partner. It's about you learning to be more flexible in your life. It's about you stepping up, and because anxiety is about being afraid. Anxiety at some level is about the world is not safe. And the antidote is to push against that, to find out that what your anxious brain is telling you oftentimes doesn't happen. So you send an email to your mother, or to your partner, and they don't blow up and scold you for it. They actually listen and apologize. And that experience is what helps you feel like the world is more safe. This is the experience that helps you feel like you're more powerful. Okay, so that's about anxiety in general. Now we got anxiety and the circumstances we're in, and how do you manage this and how do you cope? And again, you've probably heard things on TV and read it in the news, and so I'm going to be saying some things that you already know. But here's a list of things that may be helpful for you to try out to cope better with the stress of it. One, obviously, is you want to know what you can control, what you can't control. You're not going to very few of us are going to be the person who's going to find the vaccine that's going to solve this problem. We're not going to be able to control the world economy. And so you need to know that. You can worry about it, but can you really do much about it? Yeah, well, you can actually write to your congressman or your senator or whoever and talk about legislation, but you're not going to have direct control over it. That being said, what you do want to do in order to feel more empowered in your life is to really take charge of the things you can take charge of. You want to control what you can control. You have some control over your family in terms of having influence. You have control over what you do. You don't have direct control over how you feel. But now we're back to behaviors. If you do differently what you were doing, your emotions will generally change and catch up. But the starting point is to figure out what can you control and what you can't control. What's important and what's not important. We're back to how do you sort out priorities. And so take charge of that. Take charge of the things in your life you can control. And a lot of it right now is going to be planning out your everyday life. Again, you don't want to be emotionally driven. So this is where they talk about having routines. Even if you're working from home, there's articles out about dressing up for work. Don't stay in your pajamas all day long. Keep a routine, create structure. Just so you have structure helps with anxiety. If you plan your day, if you know in advance what you want to accomplish, this provides a framework for your day. And the framework itself helps keep the anxiety and the stress down. So you plan out your day, you plan out routines, days are melding in together, but make your weekdays different from your weekends in terms of whatever that may mean for you. You also want to control your environment in terms of information. If you're getting saturated by watching back-to-back news shows and getting depressed, it may be time to turn off the TV. It may be time to shift to something else so you're not getting overloaded with information you can't process or about things you can't control. That's, again, something you can do on your own. It's helpful to do things that have clear results. Again, what's difficult about the quarantining is we don't know how long it's going to last. What's difficult about the whole pandemic is we don't know the impact of all this 5 months or 6 months from now. And the antidote to that is doing things in your life that have clear endings and clear results. And this could be as simple as finishing a book that you're reading. It could be cleaning your gutters or cleaning out your garage or cleaning out a closet. But things that you do that have clear beginnings and ends where you can literally see the results in a world where everything seems nebulous and uncertain. Psychologically, this helps. This helps you feel like you have control. It helps you see that your efforts are making a difference. In terms of the people around you, this is a good time and an important time to check in with everybody. One of the things that was talked about in an article in the New York Times last month by David Brooks was the impact of all the stress on everyone in terms of mental health. And he interviewed several people who are experts in the field, and they talked about staying connected by having vulnerable conversations. And what this means is you want to take the time to have deeper kind of conversations with people. The question is, how do you do this? What you don't want to do is having how you do in kind of one-line statements, because what you're going to get back from the other person is, okay, probably. Instead, to have deeper kind of conversations, you want to ask more specific questions. You can do this with your partners, you can do this with your kids, but you want to ask, how actually are you feeling? Are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling anxious and worried? By asking specific questions, by asking them about specific feelings, you're doing two things. You're letting them know it's okay for them to talk about these things. This is particularly important for children because kids only know what's safe to talk about in our family based on what my parents talk about and what they ask me. They're looking to you to set the guidelines for what's okay to talk about. If you don't bring up topics, if you don't ask these hard questions, the impression they're going to get is we don't talk about it, and they're going to hold it in. This is not good in general for folks, particularly not good for kids, because kids tend to act out what they can't express directly. This is also going to be true, though, for other people in your life, your parents, your partners, folks like this. You want to work together as a team. You want to cover each other's backs. And so this is where you periodically check in and go, how are you doing really? How are you, or how worried are you about your job? How overloaded are you feeling trying to work from home? What can I do to help? Have these kind of clear, drill down questions just to let the other guy know you're concerned, to set the pace, to be able to kind of slip into those more vulnerable conversations. This is how you stay connected, because you feel like somebody's got your back and understands where you're coming from rather than holding stuff in, and because you're working together as a team. So if you can pull people into your life like that, that's absolutely important. The other thing you want to do as a habit to develop is the term is broadcast your emotions. Research on this has been pretty standard and pretty powerful, but you want to check in with yourself, again, periodically. If you're in a bad mood, or you didn't sleep well and you're grumpy, or you're feeling a little bit depressed and you're quiet and withdrawn, rather than snapping at everybody or, taking it out on the dog or whatever you're doing, figure out how you're feeling and let other people around you know how you're feeling. If it seems, I know I've been quiet the last couple hours, I'm just kind of tired because I didn't sleep well last night. Or I'm sorry I'm being snappy and irritable, but I'm worried about X, Y, Z. Or I'm just in a bad mood. I don't know what's causing it, but I can feel myself being irritable and edgy, and I just need some space and need some time by myself. Let people know where you're at, so they don't have to. Because if you don't say how you're feeling, people are going to make stuff up, and they're going to come up, particularly children. They're going to come up with the wrong answer. They're going to think it's about them. They're going to think you're mad at them. They're going to think they did something wrong. Let them know. Let them know. And again, you're also, particularly for kids, you're modeling for them how they need to be, so they can be able to learn to say, "I'm just in a crummy mood, and I need to be left alone," rather than yelling and barking at their siblings or the dog. You want to have your own space if possible. Some people live in smaller or larger houses, but the idea of having a place you can retreat to is important. Negotiate this, kind of work this out. Sometimes you may have to share a space depending on what your living situation is. But the idea of having a place you can go to in your own house or in your own apartment or whatever it is helpful. So negotiate that. Who's going to use the back bedroom when they need to it's not being used, when they feel like they need to have time by themselves, or kids can go to their own rooms, or I'm going to go down in the basement and I have one corner that's where my desk is and I can chill out there. But have your own space. So these are things as an adult you can do. Again, the key here is action. You want to do stuff. You want to take action. You want to change your information. You want to plan your day. You want to have the routines. You want to give structure to everyday life. You want to do things that have clear results. You can control this. You can't control how you feel, but you can control what you do in the action. Even if you don't feel like doing things oftentimes, and you probably know this from your own experience, just by trying and seeing if you get into something, oftentimes you do. You sit down and start to read a book or watch a show or work on a puzzle or clean the closet. And 5 minutes into it, even though you weren't excited about it, you start to get into it. After 5-10 minutes, if you're still not into it, switch to something else. But the idea of doing oftentimes gets you motivated. Exercise is important. Exercise is not only good for your health, but it also helps with your psychology because it kicks up endorphins. If you do short bursts of intensive exercise, you kick up endorphins, and this will help you feel better. All right, let's shift focus. What do you do for kids? Again, we already talked about it. You're going to be the model for how to help them cope. So you're going to check in with them, ask the hard questions, see how they're doing. They only know what they can talk about based on what you ask them and what you talk about. So check with them in on them periodically. Kids are starting to get stir crazy, being cramped up in the house. You want to get them out as much as possible, but you also want to cut them off at the pass. So a lot of times when you can tell, you can start to hear the sibling rivalry starting to crank up. You want to help cut it off and distract or have everybody cool down before it gets to explosive levels. Some families have set aside a quiet time where everybody kind of goes through their corners for an hour every day. It's a great idea. Helps everybody calm down, kind of recalibrate. Good thing to do. Having one-on-one time with your kids during the course of the day. This is Stanley Greenspan's floor time. Is good for kids' mental health. You don't have to have 3 hours. You can do 20 minutes. You can see your daughter after your younger son goes to bed at night. It's not the length of time. It's about dedicating the time for one-on-one time with a parent and child. The other part of it is it's helpful for the child to be in charge of the time. They get to pick what you do during this time rather than you picking it. So they can read a book, you can do Legos, but you tell them, this is your time, what do you want to do? And let them lead you. If they want to work on Legos, let them be in charge of Legos. The idea behind this is kids get bossed around all day long. And the one-on-one time gives them an opportunity not only to spend time with you, but it gives them an opportunity to feel empowered, where they're in charge, and they get to kind of sort of be a boss for the 15 or 20 minutes, and that's helpful for them psychologically. Finally, you want to do a couple of other things for yourself. One is to look ahead, where it's easy to get tunnel vision here, to feel a little bit trapped because we don't know what's going to happen. It's healthy and useful to kind of look ahead to the next chapter, to look ahead into the future. This is not going to last forever, but make plans for when this begins to clear up. What do you want to do once you're able to break out? What kind of things do you want to look forward to a year from now, say, in terms of a trip or some kind of family vacation? But this will help you pull out of that tunnel vision of right now that feels so claustrophobic. So make plans for the future, for when things change, for when you have more money. Look ahead, just so you feel like you're not trapped, so you're not stuck, so you're not getting depressed. In summary, what don't you want to do? And what you don't want to do is you don't want to have no structure. What you don't want to do is not have any routines. What you don't want to do is get saturated with too much information and you begin to feel overloaded and depressed. What you don't want to do is not do any exercise. What you don't want to do is be emotionally driven and run your days based on how you feel, but rather you want to move and do things so you can feel better. You want to be proactive. You want to be less self-critical. This is a time not to beat yourself up because you're not getting as much done as you think you should. This is a time to listen. You want to be active, but you can listen to decide and make choices about what's important to you. Again, anxiety is about your rational brain going offline, and you want to keep your rational brain back online. You want to use this time, however claustrophobic or cramped or drudgery it may feel like right now, to make the best of it by feeling like you're in charge of you, by controlling what you can control, by being able to define your day, to set up traditions for your family. It's not about faking it. It's not about pretending. It's about being honest, but also feeling empowered to do what you can do. And finally, you want to be able to think ahead and realize that this too shall pass. You know, that in weeks or a few months from now, things may look differently, and that our lives will hopefully get back to normal. But it's something to look forward to, something you can control now in terms of your outlook, your passions, your perspectives. Thanks a bunch. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.